You're listening to the We Are Libertarians podcast network. Find all of our shows at wearelibertarians.com.
Can I have your attention, please? Yes, I, Wanda Sykes here. You ever think about all the nicknames we have for breasts? Boobs, tatas, the girls, chesticles, bubbies. Heck, you might even have your own nickname for them. And yet, even though they get so much attention, they're still so ignored when it matters most. What's up with that? Well, on February 9th, tune in to see why I'm talking so much about breasts and visit yourattentionplease.com to learn more.
You found your person. Now let the Knot help you with everything else. The Knot connects you to the wedding inspo, vendors, venues, and planning tools you need to make your day totally you. Having helped plan 25 million weddings, we've got your back when it comes to every little detail like RSVPs, budgets, and more. Because your wedding comes to life with the connections that matter the most. Get started at theknot.com/audio. The Knot. Let's plan your wedding together.
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on the program. This is lifted from the Kamala Harris's record episode, and I didn't want to keep this extra hour in because it's inside baseball, and frankly, I don't know how many people are going to care about it, but some of you might, but I didn't feel that it was totally germane to the topic of the Kamala Harris episode, and so I didn't want it to be 2.5 hours long, and if it could be an hour and a half long. So those who are only interested in that might not be scared away from the length. So I figured I'd put this out there just as a, I am sometimes a pointed critic of the Mises Caucus in the Libertarian Party, and I want to explain why. I hope you'll listen with an open mind. I don't feel that I'm very unfair, and I hope that it gives a better perspective on what I think, what Reinhold thinks, and I don't speak for everybody in the We Are Libertarians network, just myself. So please take a listen, and thank you so much. And now we essentially join the program in progress.
So we're talking about not being able to trust Trump, or not being able to trust, Biden or Kamala or Mike Pence. And someone mentions that, well, Jo Jorgensen is not going to get a lot of energy, not going to win. She's lucky to get 1%. So what? I mean, do you think you should vote just because you think that your guy's going to win if you vote for him? Like if you vote for Trump and Trump loses, did you waste your vote? Did you throw your vote away? Did it not mean anything at that point? No, you should vote for the person who you want to win, because that's the only way that you can actually send a message. So we have polling, but nobody believes polling anymore. We have, when you call your representatives, well, they're only getting a small percentage of people calling them, so they have a larger weight behind them. So how do politicians really know how the voters feel except by the voting? And if you start seeing more and more people voting for third parties or for other candidates than them, they're going to start wondering why, and they're going to pivot. They're going to change. That's how we got a lot of the drug legalization that's going on right now, is because people like libertarians would be there saying, this is important to us. And if you don't vote, or if you don't give us what we're looking for on these areas, we're going to vote for your opponent. Well, they're going to change and try and incorporate that into their message, into what they're planning to do. They'll pivot that, and it'll become their idea. It'll become the Democrats achieve this or the Republicans achieve that. But if those are things you care about, you don't really care at that point. You just want those implemented the right way. And the way to do that is to send that message. And the only way to send the message is to vote for the people who are talking about those things and who are making those things be important. Right?
Yeah. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. I've only seen lower ballot races win in these local races. Libertarian Party people do win. There's several elected officials here in Indiana at the Libertarian level, but your vote is registered. It shows that you're a protest vote. It shows that you're rejecting the immorality and the principles of the two-party system. It shows it isn't you're opting out of the self-protect, the idea that Republicans will fight Democrats and Democrats will fight the other. Like, you're actually voting for somebody that reflects your values, and it's registered. And the more people that make that choice, the more that's going to grow. And the more it grows, people will start to look and go, oh, they have a shot, they have a chance. Libertarianism has grown exponentially over the last decade since I've been around. Like, when I started calling myself a libertarian in the 2000s, I had to explain what that was. I still kind of have to explain what it is, which is what libertyexplained.com is about. But it's a common topic of conversation now. Libertarian ideas are more accepted by the mainstream. We need to reach out to that third of the country that doesn't vote, because they don't see their voice represented. That's why we do this show, is to talk to the people that don't feel that they're represented by their government. So secondly, it's a matter of free speech and fighting for ballot access laws and changes and ending gerrymandering. And, people like Matt Gaetz and Ro Khanna, who are on opposite sides of so much in Congress, both agree on things like term limits and drawing districts that are not gerrymandered, that are drawn by AI. Libertarians agree with that too. There is a critical mass on some of these major issues. So neither of these two candidates have earned your vote. Now Jo Jorgensen has to earn your vote too. I totally understand if you look at this and go, I'm opting out. I heard Jason Stapleton say on his show the other day, I'm opting out of this totally. I'm not even going to worry about politics, because it just doesn't, I don't want it to affect my emotions anymore. It doesn't affect my life anymore. I'm opting out. I'm going to build something better. I'm going to build a better mousetrap. And Jason is great at explaining and helping people do that. I love politics too much to kind of focus on that, and that's why I do this kind of show. But I'm not going to lie to you that the Libertarian Party is dysfunctional like the other two parties. The Libertarian Party is an organization of broken human beings like every other party or organization. The Libertarian Party has no power. You will not win a lot of elections. It will suck the first time you run for office and get 3%, and you may never recover from it. It's hard. But at least when you look in the mirror, you don't feel disgusted with yourself voting for a complete hypocrite. Let's hear what Jo Jorgensen herself has to say. The first part is from the 96 vice presidential run that she had, and the second is from this run here.
Your question was, why vote for a third-party candidate? My answer is because the only party offering what you want is a third party, the Libertarian Party.
I think the only wasted vote is one for Trump or Biden, because they're going to give us more of what we don't want. If you want higher taxes, if you want more bungling in government, if you want to keep the troops all over the world, if you want more pollution, if you want more expensive health care, then by all means vote for Trump and Biden. I would say if you want something different, vote for something different, which would be the Libertarian Party. And I'd also like to point out that we can also make change even without being elected.
Yeah, so I'll be voting for Joe and Spike, but I can't say I'm enthusiastic about it. Go check out Spike's YouTube channel. I encourage everybody, because I was not hot on Joe either, and I can't say that I still am. I was critical of her selection, but Spike has really impressed me a lot. And if you go, and the whole point of an LP presidential campaign is you're the marketing person for 4 years. This is the only time, I've said it a million times, it's the only time your friends and family are ever going to openly invite you to screech at them about libertarianism. What do you think of the libertarian? I'm in the barber shop yesterday, and the guy goes, who's the libertarian running? Gary was kind of goofy, so is this one better? They had an awareness of Gary Johnson. They have no idea who Dave Smith or Nick Sarwark are, but they know who Gary Johnson is, just your average Joe on the street. And
that was because the media gave him the attention. I mean, that was the big problem. So you can sit there and you can shout to the heavens and try to make your case and put out videos and social media and make all the trips and interviews that you can get your hands on. But if the media doesn't give you that voice, that platform to expand on that, to make that known to the people who aren't really invested or looking into it, it's not going to go anywhere. And that was the thing about Gary, was that he was considered viable enough by the media that it made sense for them to give him those interviews. And he was doing
hundreds a month,
CNN interviews, MSNBC, CNN, he was doing 3 or 4 of those a day, right? Where he was on the screen talking to people on those platforms. Whereas, previous to that didn't happen. And I don't think it's happening again this year. We're just not getting that traction. And it's more of a perception from the media than it is anything else.
Yeah, but I will say that their campaign, Spike and Joe, as evidenced by Spike's channel, are like, I was going through libertyexplained.com is the new website that we're pumping out material to help. Like, there's not really a great resource for like newbies. Like, people kept asking me like, hey, do you have a website or a book or whatever? And I'm just like, there's nothing really comprehensive or good that like is a well-organized thing. And so that's what we're building. We're about to start launching the podcast, Liberty Explained. You can already subscribe to it. But the website is up and filled with all kinds of different resources. And, going through and building out our video playlists that you can find on our YouTube channel. When you go through the movement stuff, Harry Brown had almost everything Harry Brown did in 96 and 2000 is still relevant and I could use and post to the website. Gary Johnson didn't have a lot except a couple drug videos. Like was the criticism that he was light on policy, that he didn't know who his cabinet would be, that he didn't have a lot of his campaign didn't talk about the message. That's all valid. And so Jorgensen is the correction in the party on that. And it's still not good enough. And so at a certain point, when Dave Smith says he doesn't understand Jo Jorgensen's messaging, I have to think he's not really paying attention to their campaign. And he says he's an expert in politics, and I don't know what campaign he's ever worked on. I've worked on hundreds of campaigns. I was the executive director of the Libertarian Party of Indiana for 4 years. That's where I met Reinhold when he ran for office. And this whole, Jo Jorgensen said it was a great when Biden picked a woman, so I'm tired of this lame feminism in the LP. Well, I'm sorry. There are a lot of people, there is this instinct within, especially the Mises crowd, the Mises Caucus, to think that the candidates should target their messaging specifically to you. And if you are not happy with their message, then the whole campaign sucks and it's not worthy, and I'm not voting for you, and I'm going to stomp my feet and walk out. And I know, calling it a tantrum is childish. But frankly, out of hundreds of tweets, you pick one that was very innocuous when the lifespan of a tweet is 20 minutes and 7% of the country is on Twitter and nobody thinks Twitter is real life and it's completely inconsequential. We're going to beat up Jo Jorgensen on not running her own Twitter and not tweeting out the right things. That tweet was a tweet from a woman to other women, specifically of left-leaning virtue. And then she had 8 tweets bashing Kamala Harris's record. That wasn't what was important. It was the fact that she was reaching out to people that had cognitive dissonance with a certain vein of the movement. And there just has to start, like, we cannot, as a party, we're not, and I will not allow, with my voice, I will speak up and say, this campaign is giving the purity crowd exactly what they wanted. And they're still not happy about it. So I have to think that they're not going to be happy and they're going to try and wreck another presidential cycle with tantrums because they aren't being talked to directly because they think that they're the center of the universe. And that's not how this works. Like, anti-leftism is not libertarianism. Like, it's not the same thing. Yes, you could say that this entire podcast, if you're a left-leaning person, this entire episode was probably uncomfortable for you. There are elements to it. But women, minorities, like, the party has to reach out to other people, and that means that they're going to talk to other people that don't look like you, think like you, and talk like you. Spike, again, Darla says she praised Biden for picking Kamala. Come on. That's not what she said.
Nope.
Here's what happens. It's like Weld with Clinton. These things get into this echo chamber and get repeated until you're saying things that are not accurate. It's like the InfoWars article and Ron Paul Institute article about Jo Jorgensen saying that she thinks that you should be fired for cancel culture or whatever. If you read what she said, if you listen to the interview, it's not what the headline of the Ron Paul Institute article said. But that has now become gospel because people don't go back and actually look at the original source. And it becomes a tool to bludgeon an internal opponent. And so my main criticism with the Mises Caucus is that they're the ones that invented caucusing. And so instead of everybody kind of working together, because what used to happen is that after the presidential candidate was selected, people weren't happy, but they would generally work for the candidate. That stopped last cycle, and it's continuing this cycle. There is no unity because one faction wants to tear down the other factions with dismissive and rude language and saying this person's not pure when this is the most pure candidate in the time since Bednarik. You know, it's not helpful, and all it does is make us look dysfunctional because you're being intentionally divisive. Like it makes it harder for shows like ours who are trying to reach out to new people, like, to join the movement, because when we did that survey of 100 people of you know, our audience and beyond, like, what is the thing that turns you off from libertarianism? The number one comment was the comments on your Instagram page. And who is commenting on our Instagram page? It's the Hoppians. It's the guys who are alt-right adjacent. It is the people who every time we say the word black on our Instagram give us 300 comments of why racism doesn't exist and you guys are a bunch of left-wing SJW assholes. Like, you're hurting the movement, and everybody's seeing it for what it is, and everybody's starting to alienate you and give you negative feedback for that reason, for everything I'm saying. And instead of going, all this negative criticism from people who are not, there isn't a Sarwark around every corner, so why am I getting so much negative social feedback? You double down and you just start name calling even more, and people are jumping off your ship left and right. When the Mises Caucus came in, I said great, because the fight before the Mises Caucus was the Ron Paul Campaign for Liberty Mises crowd put down the Libertarian Party and made it a joke and said join the Republican Party. And it wasn't good for the movement because it was creating a division. So when the Mises Caucus came in, I was glad because I would hope that it was going to heal that rift. But now we have people who continually bash everything going on in the party so they can gain power. That's fucking ridiculous. And it's childish. And it's why you're told that you're tantruming. That's what it is. If you are tantruming. You're right. That's the outside perspective from people that are not liberals, people that have just been around for a long time and are just tired of the drama. And so, you know, that's where we stand on it. Yeah. And I'm glad. So Darla says Dave Smith was the person who made me a libertarian. I'm glad. Like, I'm not Sarwark. I don't want to push Tom Woods or Dave Smith out of the party. I think that they are a tremendous benefit to libertarianism. It's just that yep. they're not working well with everybody else, and I think it's for a specific reason. And it's bullshit. And they're getting the negative feedback is for a reason. But it doesn't mean that they don't do a tremendous, especially Tom Woods, has done a tremendous service for the libertarian movement. I just don't like the loser brigade shit is so unhelpful and so divisive, and it creates a faction. And then further divides people by factionalizing everyone and throwing everybody into that camp instead of having an honest. And I do like that Dave Smith is starting to have, Eric July is starting to have some of these people on to have these conversations, because I have to think that when you're starting to get feedback that is negative, like Dave Smith even said in his podcast, like, I was surprised by the amount of pushback. This is why, like, because we're going to ruin another cycle with this tantruming. Like, you're mad about one tweet when Twitter's not real life. Who gives a fuck if Jo Jorgensen runs her own Twitter? Do we really care? Like Jo Jorgensen is spending her time going out and talking to voters or doing interviews on C-SPAN like we just played. That's what's important. No, like what it's just so frustrating. Like the nitpicky bullshit that when your brand is built on punching the LP in the face and they're a joke and the messaging sucks and only I can save their messaging, like people just get tired of it and they start tuning you out and your effectiveness and your influence starts to wear out. And I've been pointing this out and I keep getting beat up for it, but I'm trying to help. I'm not Sarwark. I'm not against the Mises Caucus. I'm just saying you're hurting yourselves and you're hurting the movement at large. And I do actually care, which is why I pointed out. Like, I do actually care that Ron Paul's reputation is being tarnished by a bunch of conspiracy theorists and possible Russian assets like Daniel McAdams. Like, I love Ron Paul, and I'm mad about what the Ron Paul Institute constantly puts out. Like, I wouldn't say anything if I didn't give a shit about Ron Paul. You know, like Dave Smith is a credit to the libertarian movement. You know, it's just, but
he's not infallible. He doesn't. And that's what really irritates me is when we have people who are brought into the movement, whether you've been brought in through by, Harry Brown, or you were brought in by Ron Paul, or you were brought in by Dave Smith or Tom Woods. Once you are brought in and you start to say, hey, I'm a libertarian, keep learning, keep questioning. Don't stop there. Don't just take that person's view and words and make them your own. That's not being an individual. That's not being actualized. That's letting somebody else do your thinking for you. Become yourself, question everything, and develop your own views on things, right? And it's okay to disagree with people. You know, I can sit there and say that I think Dave Smith was wrong on his defense of Molyneux because of race realism, which isn't a real, isn't a real thing, but he's trying to say it's factual. I can have my opinions with Nick Sarwark and say I don't think he should have done this or said this.
No, my relationship with Nick ended when I criticized him publicly for going after Tom Woods. Yeah. And I had a private conversation with him at the national convention in 2018 and said, you need to stop because Tom Woods is a benefit to the Libertarian Party and you're needlessly dividing the movement by doing this. And he said, thank you. And then he kept doing it. And Nick and I have never had the same friendship as we had before that. My friendship ended because I defended Tom. But I'm sure that I would never get, what I care about is the movement. And this is why I'm often critical and talk about this inside baseball stuff. And maybe we should cut this out and put this in as a separate podcast. But because this isn't relevant to Kamala Harris. But I care about the movement. Because I think we have tremendous potential. And when you look at the under 40 crowd, when you look at exit polling here in Indiana, for instance, for Lucy Brenton, and when she ran for Senate, under 40, we get 10% of the vote. And the Libertarian Party specifically gets 10% of the vote. And that's probably with a lot of libertarians, not A, not knowing they're libertarians, or B, not voting because they didn't like Lucy or whatever. Like, I think the millennial and Zoomer libertarian vote is enormous. And I think we are at a point where Buckley was in the 1950s, where if you have a National Review type organization that can unite the various clans of libertarianism and we can all get on the same page and start working together, we can build a movement that starts to have significant power as these old two parties start to fish for their identity. If Biden gets elected, the left is going to eat itself for political power because he's a weak president, just like under Carter. If Donald Trump loses, the right is going to be searching for a new identity because Donald Trump ruined the identity that they have. Like, we are on the precipice of libertarianism flourishing because of technology. And we can ruin that, and we can continue all this bullshit and quibble over cultural issues that don't matter. Instead, the number one issues in our survey were taxes, lowering the cost of living, inflation, healthcare, lowering the price of healthcare. That's what people want. they don't want the cultural stuff. And if you go and look at like as I was scouring all this stuff, if you go look at any of the think tanks in the libertarian movement, but Mises highlights it best. You go back and look at the stuff that they were doing under Obama or in 2013, like it was all economics, it was taxes, it was traditional libertarian orthodoxy. And over the Trump era, it has become cultural issues. And that's not what people are looking for. Like, you know, let's see here. There's a comment I wanted to respond to. And that's why I think Spike was totally right on Dave Smith. Like they were both, if you haven't listened to Spike Cohen on Dave Smith, it was a great conversation. They were super respectful of each other. And I agree wholeheartedly with Spike. I think he made the libertarian case for why systemic racism exists, why we should partner with people we don't agree with to fight it. I don't buy the idea that there is this massive left infiltration. The reality is, okay. So Darla says, I think people are just tired of hearing about how bad they are because of their non-existent white privilege. What I've tried to explain is that as I used to be the libertarian, and you go back and listen to this show, like, especially if you listen to like the Ferguson episode, I'm saying all the same things as a lot of like a Dave Smith is saying now. But as I got out of my libertarian echo chamber and started going into more professional circles, and I started, because at the time I was just really still entrenched. All my friend groups were all in the Libertarian Party because I had worked in the Libertarian Party. As I have expanded my circle into talking to people outside of my culture, outside of my bubbles, outside of my socioeconomic classes, I've realized that I had a tendency to think that everybody thought like me and that my definition of libertarianism was the definition. I had a tendency to deny other people's experiences, look at other explanations that I knee-jerk disagreed with as fake. And now that I kind of talk to a wider, broader range of people through my weekend radio show, through the Pat Down, I'm starting to realize that major criticisms generally all have some truth because they're coming from an experience in life that I don't have access to. I don't know what it's like to be a black man in America. I don't know what it's like to be a lesbian black female, and what different complications they have in life than I might have. And so there's a responsibility in some ways. We must reach out to people and have conversations that aren't in our sphere. And a big change in We Are Libertarians has been not just looking at things from my version of libertarianism, trying to talk to my libertarians and share my experience, and it's birds of a feather flocking together. What I've tried to do is, on these types of shows, try to get in the head of Kamala Harris and understand why she's making the choices she made. Why does Mike Pence think the things that he does? What are the shades of this? Like in the Joe Biden episode, it's easy to just go, Joe Biden's the devil and he's awful. But like, why did Joe Biden make the choices he made, and what does that say about him? And talking to liberal friends, talking to other people, like not being narcissistic and thinking that my world is the world. And I think that happens a lot in the libertarian movement because the nature of social media pushes everybody into your algorithm is what you like, and they want to show you what you like. And so when my commentary or criticisms hit differently and strikes you as odd or weird, it's because I'm trying and actively seeking out other opinions and asking, like, what is it like doing this? What is it like doing that? And that's something I didn't ever do. And I don't think that many libertarian commentators often try to do that. I think they try to appeal to the libertarian base. And like, I'm glad that Jo Jorgensen is trying things that she thinks will bring in females, right? Like how many, she's trying to message And I think like they genuinely believe it. I hate when people say they're pandering to the left, because that's like saying that like people recoil when you say that Dave Smith is dog whistling to racists. He's not. He genuinely believes what he says, and other people from different walks of life have a different perspective than he does, and they see it differently. Jo Jorgensen, Spike Cohen, has a different worldview than you. And so you can't just be mad at Spike Cohen for having a different worldview than you. You should figure out why he thinks differently than you. You know, but that's hard. Like, that takes some effort instead of just going, this thing fits my confirmation bias, so I'm going to pick that out and use that. So I don't think that there is, I think we've just gotten lazy. Like, I got really bummed out going, like, I literally went through thousands of YouTube, like, videos on libertarian channels trying to curate these playlists, because as people over the next, like, few weeks want to learn more about libertarianism, I want them to have up-to-date resources, stuff that, like, hold on. My cat is stuck.
Yeah.
So I want them to, I want them to, and yeah, like I have always held, because the experience of the Ron Paul people telling me to fuck off, essentially, when I worked for the Libertarian Party and putting down my efforts has never left me. And it was really insulting. And there is an element of disliking Ron Paul people as a result of it. But it's their doing, right? It's the Paul bots that said, you know, you're wasting your time in the LP, that just like, man, I know. So, you know, when I was executive director, I was full-time, and I was working with hundreds of Hoosier libertarians that put their heart and soul into their efforts and would be bummed out by some Ron Paul campaign for liberty douche, you know, who would put down what they were doing, and like they'd get bummed out by it. And I'm just like, that's not cool. Like, everybody who makes an effort, like, their contribution should be valued, unless their name is Chris Cantwell. Like, then, you know, they're like, that's why I look at Tom Woods and I go, there are things I disagree with him on some of the COVID stuff, like 2 degrees. Like, I don't think that, you know, like Tucker, Jeffrey Tucker is just on a different planet with some of the shit. Like, when he's saying that lockdowns were invented by a kindergartner in 1997 or what, like, what? Like, they were doing quarantining in the 1918 pandemic. You're just like, you're misinterpreting information or intentionally like adjusting it to be manipulative. And so I disagree with him on that. But there isn't anybody in the movement in the last 20 years that has done more to free information and basically spread libertarian ideas than Jeffrey Tucker. Like, he's the one who put the free ebooks on Mises.org. Like, that contribution alone has been tremendous. So just because I disagree with him on one thing, it doesn't mean his contributions are worthless. And so I don't get when we go, I don't like this message that doesn't appeal to me. This whole campaign sucks. I'm not going to vote for them. Like, it's very self-centered, and it's very, it's not how a free society would work. Like, you're going to, in the free market, have to interact with people that you don't agree with. And so why not start building those muscles on interacting with people that you don't necessarily agree with? My understanding and debating of the left has become so much stronger because I'm going in, week out, across from Dion on the pat down, who is a socialist, and he's pushing me and I'm pushing him, and we're meeting on common ground and finding places we agree. And I may be more left than I was 5 years ago on certain things, but it's because I've realized, like, oh, I needed to do, like, so I just think that a lot of the conversations that are coming out of the Mises Caucus is self-centered and unhelpful. And I feel that way because of 20 years of experience. And a lot of you guys are younger and don't know politics and don't understand politics, and you've been in it for 2 years. And I'm forgiving of that, but at the same time, leave everybody the fuck alone. Like, you know, we're continuing this divide. So the Cato Institute was started to push Murray Rothbard's ideas. The Koch brothers funded the Cato Institute so Murray Rothbard could have an economic think tank. And then Ed Crane came in and expanded the reach of it. And Murray Rothbard was unhappy that it went from being the Murray Rothbard Institute to a different mission. So he quit. And then one of the Koch brothers kept his stock in the Cato Institute in his safe, and they stole basically Murray Rothbard's stock. And so from then on, which not cool, right? And so both sides kind of bear some blame for some of this. And so what ended up happening is a Rothbardian versus Craniac war that's been going on for 40 years. And the millennial libertarians need to be the generation that just say, enough of your drama. If you are a Rothbardian, you can be friends with a constitutionalist. If you are a minarchist, you can have a conversation with a mutualist. Our enemy is the state, not each other.
And the Hoppians.
Fuck the Hoppians. I'm just kidding. No, like I don't. All I know is that when I get like swarmed on Twitter by the alt-right guys, they always have Hoppe as their profile picture. But you know, it sort of makes you go, all right, this brutalist mindset is prevalent in one central area. So, yeah, that's where I come down on it. That's why I'm critical of it. I don't feel that I am irrational. I'm certainly not coming at it because you're right and I'm left, and you know, I want you to agree with me. I'm trying. I am in politics. There are just a lot of different types, and I'm a movement builder. Like that's what I've always cared about. I care about growing third party challenges to the two party state. I care about what makes a healthy movement. That's why I eat oat bran every morning.
Yeah, and when you mentioned the splits that happened 40 years ago, and there's some quibble on whether or not those were stolen or if they were part of the agreement. But what it ended up happening was it got so bad that in 1983, the party split in half. Half of the party walked out and went and joined the Republicans. And that's why we ended up with a liberty movement inside the Republican Party, because the Republican Party was not liberty involved at the time. So they thought that they would try to convert the Republicans over to be libertarians, and it has been an invisible failure. What happened? We had 50 state ballot access in 1980. We had 1% of the vote in 1980, and then by 1984, we're back down to under 40 ballot access, or even less than that. We're getting 0.25% of the vote. It's because of that split, because people couldn't work together anymore.
Yeah.
Right. They couldn't figure out common grounds. Libertarians, all the different sects of libertarianism have like 90% common ground. They disagree on a couple things. They just disagree on those things so much that they're putting the line in the sand there. And it's insane. So that was always my complaint when the Mises Caucus first came in, was Michael Heiss was advertising it as they were going to take over the party. And
when in reality, I'll be honest, like having worked for the Advocates for Self-Government in 2013, I was the marketing director of, if you've ever taken the world's smallest political quiz or done an Operation Politically Homeless outreach thing, like that was what I did for 2013. And so I spent an inordinate amount of time, because they were an entry point for the movement. It's since changed, which is why I built libertyexplained.com to fill that gap as the Advocates have shifted. Most of the Libertarian Party were Rothbardians. They just didn't like the fact that the Rothbardian crowd were dicks to them about their political stance, because they didn't want to be Republicans. Mm-hmm. And so it is the personal choices of a faction that made the LP somewhat hostile towards the other thing. And like, we're at the point where like that has to just go away. Like, because the reality is, I don't know many, like, I talk to a lot of libertarians, like hundreds a week, because of people emailing or messaging or commenting or whatever. I don't know a lot of people. I know a lot of people who are on the beginning of the train, and then I know a lot of people who are anarchists. I don't know a lot of people like Ryan who are libertarian socialists. I don't know a lot of people who are like the Tyler Cowen types who want, common good conservatism, but a libertarian version of it. I don't know many people who aren't anarchists, I guess is what I'm trying to say, or aspire to be anarchists. You're not, but I think that gun to your head, if you said a perfect world, if man were okay, I'm for a night watchman state because I don't think that private courts work, so I would technically be a minarchist.
Right. Well, my whole contention on the anarchism stuff is I think that anarchists have the same issue that socialists have, is that their idea of the perfect world doesn't mesh with human nature.
Right.
So there's a human nature aspect of wanting to have some sort of rule structure in place and some sort of government in place. You've never seen an anarchist. So I know Spooner had said this, and anarchists say this a lot, where they say that the government we have failed to stop the government we have now, right? So trying to do a minarchist type of government with the original Constitution, failed to prevent it growing and bloating and becoming what it is today. Well, there's been no anarchist in society that has ever stopped from becoming a government society, right? When you have, and part of it comes to being definitions of words, right? So what's a government, and what's a private organization? So when you break it down, if you have three people living in an area and one person is trying to overrun one of the other people, and then those two people come together and defend because let's say they're weaker than the one who's stronger, who's trying to tell them what to do. When those two come together to become a common defense against the third acting outside of what is acceptable boundaries that they are setting, that's a government. So even at that small of a level, you still have something that you call a government. Now you can call it something else and then say we're anarchists because we don't believe in, that government, but you're still employing government at that point. So there's always going to be rules for society that are in place. They have to be enforced somehow. The question is how you do it. And I think a lot of people get caught up in the words and the phrasing and the definitions that they're choosing to use and not the ones that other people are choosing to use, and using it as a divisive nature between different aspects of the philosophy.
Yeah.
Right?
When in reality,
why are we fighting about the end state when
Right.
we're so far away from anything close to resembling what all of us would agree would be a better end state than what we have now, right? Let's get the boat turned in the other direction and start getting more and more freedom. And then we can have all the arguments and fights and quibbles over the minutia of what that end state looks like at that level.
Yeah,
why are we
like
fighting about it now?
Listen, I was going to vote. Most likely, I was going to vote for Jo Jorgensen or Jacob Hornberger, or I probably would have even voted for Adam Kokesh. You know what I mean? Like it's not because I'm a Libertarian Party hardcore person. I'm not anymore, like I used to be. But
What are the options?
It's that what are my options, right? Like to say that I'm not going to vote for Jo Jorgensen because of a tweet, when your options are not registering as a protest vote by opting out, or voting for Donald Trump or Joe Biden, the best
Or Green Party.
The best choice to me available is the Libertarian Party presidential candidate. So, I'm a lot more forgiving of things. I don't know how you'd say it. I'm not a purist, or I take people as they are. I tend to be the type of person who's like, I'm going to trust everyone until they let me down. Where I think a lot of people operate from I'm going to trust no one until they prove me wrong type of a mentality. And I think that's probably why I look at it differently. But, one other comment, Malice really goes hard after the LP. I think Michael Malice is brilliant. I loved The New Right. I love Michael Malice in general. I think that's hack. I think that's really easy. I think if you're beating up on the Libertarian Party or making jokes at the Libertarian Party's expense, I think it's bad comedy. It's not even funny. Like, if you're bringing up James Weeks, that's hack. Like, just working in the comedy world, like, I can tell you that it's the equivalent of doing airplane food jokes.
Or Carrot Top.
Yeah, like Carrot Top's way more brilliant than that joke. Like, it's just in reality. So it's like the dad jokes of the libertarian movement. And
Aleppo.
Malice is just better than that. I've seen him tweet things and say things that are like, oh, I wish I were even 3/4 as smart as that guy. Half as smart. But beating up on the LP, what I really kind of think is, and I think there's a certain wing of the libertarian movement that will not be libertarian in expressing themselves as a libertarian in 2 to 3 years. I think that the Hoppe crowd is going to break off of the libertarian movement once they realize they can't reform the party. They can only get 25% of the vote in the Libertarian Party. They're constantly doing battle. Like, at a certain point, when you're fighting with someone every single day, all the time, and you open up your Twitter and it's nothing but fights, it's exhausting. That's why we're putting everything from 2013 or 2014 to 2017 behind the paywall. I just got tired of fighting with everybody all the time. That type of broadcasting is very exhausting. And so you either go, I got to do this differently so I can, like, keep my sanity, or you, like, double down and go off and do your own thing. Like, I don't know. So I think there's a portion of the movement that is expressly libertarian that is just not going to be libertarian in the next couple of years, and they're going to pursue a Bismarckian state of pure power politics. You know, when you know, Dave Smith and Michael Malice have a conversation about why monarchy is good and democracy is bad, and then all of a sudden, and they're having a fully fleshed out conversation, because this is part of the problem, so to speak. Oh, that was so clever. Part of the problem, so to speak, is that two intelligent people will have a nuanced conversation, and then Hoppe bots or Paul bots will grab that and just echo that and repeat it, and it distills down into grunting, basically. And then people hold the two people having the conversation accountable for the grunting. Well, that's stupid. Like, you know, if a Dave Smith fan is tweeting hyperbolic things at me like they constantly do, I don't hold him accountable for it, because he's not telling anybody to do that. You know, it's the person that is using the anonymous account to be an asshole that's responsible. It's just, but when I see 2 weeks after that conversation, monarchy being discussed in libertarian circles for the first time ever, I go, these people want to, so Bismarck, why Bismarck in Germany pre-Hitler was important is that he used the state essentially to preserve the power of the nobility, the noble class, the elites, and used it to essentially, and this is why the French Revolution kicked off too, is that they were conserving the power of the existing order. And eventually that broke down because they went too far. And then you get things like World War I, Weimar Germany, Hitler, and a pure power state internally never works. It's why socialism doesn't work. It's why Nazism didn't work. It's why Bismarckianism didn't work. But the idea that a monarch or a king will work versus democracy is foolish, because it's so I think there is a wing of the libertarian movement currently that is being seduced by that idea of we can build a conservative state to fight the left, when they don't look at the utilitarian view of it and say Donald Trump is president now and can't do it. Like we have the most, they'll say in one breath, we have the most totalitarian American state ever. And then in the next breath say we need it to be more totalitarian because it's not going far enough, when they're not achieving the goals that they say they do. So I think
that's how the classical liberals got started. I mean, it was Madison really was fighting against Hamilton. Hamilton wanted a monarchy, you know, and Madison was so against that. And that's how parties even got started. It was because of that fight over monarchism versus individualism. So we lost something. We had gone through an enlightenment period during that time with what Locke had been writing and then what Jefferson and Madison were pushing through. That was really fighting against the idea of a ruling class, a ruling state, a more individualist type of society, and it ended. I mean, we left the Enlightenment era early 1900s when we started going into more like progressive ideas and more back to more conservative stuff. So, that's what libertarianism really is trying to get that back, trying to get that individualism, that what Jefferson said in his first inaugural address, where the best government is the one that prevents people from harming each other, but otherwise leaves them alone to live their lives, right? So, and let them decide how things should be. And, that's considered so fringe these days when it was almost the basis of what this country was founded on. And both the Republicans and the Democrats have lost complete sight of that in their bid for trying to gain ultimate power, to become that monarchy, as it were. They want to destroy the other party and be in complete control of everything, right? They don't want to work with them anymore. It's become such a split, and it didn't always used to be that way, but it's just getting worse and worse and worse. And I don't know the answer to that other than just stop telling them no and quit giving them the power that they're abusing and coveting so much. Take it back.
Yeah. We got to start wrapping up because I have to go to some family stuff. But in my opinion, I don't think the Liberty influence on the Republicans has been a complete failure. There is recognition of the Liberty Caucus within the Republicans. Yes. But the Freedom Caucus now is backing an unconstitutional executive order to take the power, the initiation of spending for the president when it's only given to the House in the Constitution. And then Thomas Massie, I think, will be running for president next time. Would you vote for him if he runs as a Republican? I would. I would vote for Thomas Massie. But I will say that Thomas Massie and Justin Amash are examples of how far right the right is going under Trump. And this is a cautionary tale for many in the Mises sort of world, the people who listen to Malice, because he's expressly Hamiltonian. Justin Amash was the heir apparent to Ron Paul. Anointed by Ron Paul as the heir apparent 10 years ago, along with Rand and Massie. Well, when we did the interview on the Chrissy and Jesse show with Amash, I asked him out of my own personal glee, can you change it from the inside? And he said, absolutely not. It's unchangeable. It must be done from the outside, and the Libertarian Party is the best vehicle to do that. Justin Amash has not changed. And there are people within the libertarian movement who call Justin Amash a leftist. Well, Justin Amash was the heir apparent to Ron Paul. Massie is so far left to people in the Republican Party that they're trying to primary him. There's a great documentary on HBO called The Swamp that follows Massie and Matt Gaetz. And Massie is a decent guy who is constantly under attack by the president and his fellow Freedom Caucus people because he's not blindly following the president. We know somebody who assisted in that effort, didn't we? Yeah. And so he wouldn't vote for one unconstitutional thing, and so the next day he got a primary opponent by threat of the president. And so when Justin Amash have become leftist to you, you are too far right. And if anybody...
That's the problem.
Is influencing you, they're too far right, and they need to check themselves because Justin Amash is a constitutionalist, and Thomas Massie too. They fit perfectly within the libertarian movement. Constitutionalists belong the same as anarcho-capitalists and I'd even say anarcho-communists. Part of the reason that I have been more vocal about the what I call the leave them alone strategy is because we had a libertarian socialist on our staff who ran the Heretic. His name is Ryan Lindsay. He never advocated the violence of the state. He had different reasons for being a libertarian socialist. He had more leftist predilections. And the way that he was treated was so, even by our own Facebook group, which is one of the more rational, nice Facebook groups, He was treated so poorly. He now is with the Democratic, the Socialist Party of America, whatever they're called, the DFA.
DSA, yeah.
DSA. He doesn't want to even associate with libertarians anymore because he was treated so poorly. He's become more socialist and less libertarian because of the way that the movement treated him. Now, maybe you think that's a good thing, but I don't, because I learned a lot from Ryan. And I like that Ryan was a check and balance on my more conservative-leaning libertarianism. And so I just think it's a shame that we can't, in our movement in this day and age, have the kind of conversations that Karl Hess and Murray Rothbard and Hazlitt and Hayek used to have. You know, it
used to be about winning the minds, right? Winning the marketplace of ideas,
right?
And it's, in order to have a free market, right, you have to have all different types of people in there. The same with the free marketplace of ideas. And you can't grow and become more convinced about your opinion unless you continuously question it. You counter it. You listen to other people give you why they think that it's not going to work. And then you have to think about that, process it, and figure out what is the best answer. That's how you grow as a person, by continuously questioning yourself. And when we talk about Massey, I don't see any scenario where Massey would win the nomination of the Republican Party.
They're too far, too far gone.
Yeah. And not only that, it was never, the Republican Party is about conserving the way things are, and libertarianism and liberty are not going to fit into that, and it never will. That's why it was so weird for them to try to make that change and become the Liberty Caucus. The Liberty Caucus itself, what was the rule? That Liberty Caucus could not ever support a libertarian candidate.
Yeah,
they can never say that they put their backing behind a libertarian candidate. It was against the rules.
Maybe Maloney has changed things over at Young Americans for Liberty, but they refuse to support libertarian candidates as well.
Yeah.
So, it's like, okay, if you've got a libertarian with a winnable race, you're not going to support them just because of party label. That seems counterintuitive, and
then they want libertarians to come over and support them.
Right. Exactly. So you know what? When you get pushback and people tell you go fuck yourself, that's why you're told to go fuck yourself, because it's been 4 decades of this kind of like fuck you, we're superior to you, and then when you want to come in and quote take over the party, fuck you. Like right. Those hurts, those slights, those comments, those don't go away, and those people who have been involved in the Libertarian Party for 40 years that are delegates. And this is where Heiss went wrong with the Mises Caucus. In general, these people don't ever sit down and have like conversations with old people that I can tell. Like they just go after it. Like the way that the Mises Caucus came in, we're young, we're arrogant, we're going to do things our way, and you're going to submit because we're going to force you to. We're going to grow in popular and become the movement. Instead of like, and I talked to people 2-3 years ago when this started. They didn't have conversations with longtime libertarians. They attacked them. They put them down. They dismissed them. And it was a continuation of what those people had gone through for 20 years. And so there's a resentment in the party towards them because of their attitude. But then it's not them that's the problem. It's leftists are infiltrating the party. Instead of like having a conversation, because the way that politics actually works is you coalition build and you have conversations with people who have the power. And so it was an arrogant entrance that has never been submitted, and things have just gotten worse. 2 of the worst things I've ever seen happen in the Libertarian Party. The first was Roger Stone. Yes, that Roger Stone. The worst thing I've ever seen anybody do in this party was when he was trying to run the Madam for New York City, and the party challenged it because they were still, after 30 years, smarting from Howard Stern when he ran as a Libertarian for governor and completely effed them. You had the party person that ran against her in the Libertarian primary. Roger Stone took a mailer that looked like when a sex offender moves into a town, he put out a mailer that was an attack on that Libertarian candidate. And it was so devastating that man had to move to a different state. I think he moved to Florida. It was the grossest, most horrible thing I've ever seen. And I know about it because Stone's henchman bragged to me about it in 2012. The second worst thing I've ever seen is what happened to Joshua Smith, who Reinhold and I have no love for. What was done with his daughter was the grossest thing I've ever seen. His second grossest thing that I've seen. And I know who is behind it. And that person was victim shaming in the 2016 campaign. You know, she was living in Indiana at a certain point. That was really awful. And I feel bad that poor girl was caught in the middle of that and was encouraged to do that. The next worst thing is the Mises chair from California, whatever her name is, and what she said to Era Stewart. And those two things happened in the last 3 months. Like, are we just going to keep doing that? Are we going to keep going down that road? Are we going to keep treating each other like Roger Stone treats other people? Like, that doesn't seem like the kind of party that I want to be involved in. And that's why I tell my listeners, don't get involved in the party, because I don't want you to get hurt. I don't want to it's fucked up. So, all right, we gotta wrap up. Quick final thoughts, Reinhold.
Now, final thoughts. Do we want to do final thoughts on Kamala Harris, and then you merge that into where we're
give me the final, Reinhold. Give me your final thoughts on. Hold on.